My heart used to beat to the rhythm of domestic bliss. My marriage to James was a masterpiece, painted with the vibrant hues of love and companionship. Our son, Trevor, was the golden brushstroke that completed our picture of perfection. We lived in a quaint little town called Riverside, where tranquility reigned and life moved at a gentle pace. 15 years had flown by, each one more cherished than the last. Our love, as solid as the bedrock beneath our home, weathered every storm. Trevor, our pride and joy, had recently graduated and was back home for the summer. Among his friends, Logan stood out, a young man with eyes as green as spring meadows and a smile that could light up the darkest room. He was practically family, a frequent visitor to our home. One sweltering summer evening, James was detained at work, leaving me alone with Trevor and Logan. They decided to throw a party, and I happily helped them prepare. As the party unfolded, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was different about Logan. His gaze, usually playful and friendly, held a deeper, more intense undercurrent. As the night wore on and the guests dwindled, I stayed behind to clean up. Logan offered to help, his voice soft and soothing. Suddenly, the lights flickered and died, plunging the room into darkness. I felt a surge of fear, but it was quickly replaced by a strange sense of anticipation as Logan's hand brushed against mine. When the lights came back on, we stood face to face, our proximity electric. I could feel the heat rising to my cheeks as he gazed at me with a look that made my heart race. "You've always been so kind to me, Mrs. Harrison," he murmured, his voice low and husky. My heart pounded in my chest as his words hung in the air. "Well, you're almost like family," I replied, my voice barely a whisper. He took a step closer, his breath fanning my face. "Sometimes I think of you differently," he confessed, his voice barely audible. In that moment, the world tilted on its axis. The serene landscape of my life was shattered, replaced by a dangerous, exhilarating uncertainty. The air crackled with tension as Logan leaned in, his eyes burning with desire. I tried to pull away, but his grip tightened and his lips met mine. A jolt of electricity surged through me, igniting a fire deep within. His kiss was both passionate and tender, a dangerous dance that threatened to consume me. When we finally broke apart, I was breathless, my cheeks flushed with a mixture of embarrassment and exhilaration. Logan's gaze was intense, almost predatory. "We can't do this, Logan," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "This is wrong. I'm married. I have a family." He stepped back, his expression somber. "I know," he replied, his voice heavy with regret. "But I can't deny how I feel about you, Mrs. Harrison." With those words, he turned and left, leaving me reeling. The incident with Logan had irrevocably altered the course of my life. Every encounter, every stolen glance, was fraught with tension and unspoken desire. I was trapped in a whirlwind of conflicting emotions, torn between my love for my family and the intoxicating pull of forbidden passion. Days turned into weeks, and the weight of my secret grew heavier. One morning, as I tended to the garden, I saw Logan approaching. His expression was grave, and I knew something was wrong. We retreated to the kitchen, the silence between us thick and oppressive. "I can't stop thinking about you," he confessed, his voice barely a whisper. "I know this is wrong, but I can't ignore my feelings. I want to be with you." His words hung in the air, heavy with longing. I felt a pang of guilt and confusion. "Logan, this is complicated," I replied, my voice trembling. "I'm married. I have a family. I can't destroy everything we've built." As we sat there, lost in our thoughts, the front door creaked open. "Mom, are you here?" Trevor's voice echoed through the house, shattering the fragile moment. Trevor's eyes widened as he took in the scene. "Logan, is everything okay?" he asked, his voice filled with confusion. Logan quickly recovered. "Yeah, everything's fine. I just wanted to talk to your mom." He stood up abruptly, a forced smile plastered on his face. "I should go now." As he left, a wave of dread washed over me. The strange encounter had left me shaken, and a growing sense of unease settled in my heart. That evening, a chilling message appeared on my phone. "I know about you and Logan. Be careful." My hands trembled as I read the message. Someone knew our secret. Fear gnawed at me, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I tried to convince myself it was a harmless prank, but a deep-seated fear persisted. Days turned into a blur of anxiety and paranoia. I moved through my days, a ghost of my former self. Every shadow, every noise sent shivers down my spine. I knew I had to confront the situation, so I met with Logan at a secluded cafe. I got a message. I confessed, showing him the phone. Someone knows about us. Logan's face hardened. "This is serious. We need to be careful." He promised to investigate, but the fear lingered. Another message arrived, a chilling ultimatum. "Tonight, your husband will know the truth, unless you do as I say." Panic surged through me. I couldn't let James find out about our affair. It would shatter our family. I met with the blackmailer, a shadowy figure named Michael, in an abandoned park. His eyes gleamed with malice as he demanded $10,000. I was trapped, a pawn in a dangerous game. I couldn't afford to lose everything. With Logan's help, I devised a plan. I would meet Michael, but instead of money, I would give him a bag of fake bills. The police would be waiting, ready to arrest him. The night of the meeting, my heart pounded with fear and anticipation. As I approached Michael, I felt a surge of adrenaline. He snatched the bag, his eyes lighting up with greed. But before he could react, the police swooped in, arresting him. I was free from the blackmailer's clutches, but the shadow of our secret still loomed over us. I knew our affair couldn't continue. The risk was too great, the consequences too devastating. As I walked away from the park, I realized that some secrets are best left buried, no matter how painful the truth may be. The weight of our secret hung heavy between us. I couldn't live a lie any longer, but I needed time to sort out my feelings. A week had passed since Michael's arrest, and a fragile sense of normalcy had returned. Yet, the threat of exposure still loomed. Logan was a constant source of support, but I knew we had to be cautious. The guilt gnawed at me, and I realized I would soon have to make a difficult choice. One sunny afternoon, as I was lost in a sea of family photos, the doorbell rang. A stern-faced woman in a business suit stood on my doorstep. "Mrs. Harrison?" she asked. "Yes," I replied, my heart pounding. "Detective Sarah Miller, I need to talk to you about the Michael blackmail case." Fear gripped me as I invited her in. Over coffee, she dropped a bombshell. "Michael claims he has evidence of your affair with Logan. He says you blackmailed him to keep quiet." I vehemently denied the accusations. "He blackmailed me for money. I'm not having an affair with Logan." The detective's gaze was unwavering. "We'll verify the facts. If you're telling the truth, you have nothing to fear. But if you're lying, it could have serious consequences." As she left, I was left reeling. I knew I had to talk to Logan. We met in a secluded spot, the weight of the situation heavy in the air. "We have a problem," I confessed, recounting the detective's visit. "She suspects us. If they find evidence, we're finished." Logan's brow furrowed. "We need to find out what Michael had on us. If we destroy that evidence, They can accuse us. We embarked on a desperate mission, seeking information from Michael's associates. One such person was Jack, a shady character living on the outskirts of town. When we confronted him, he was initially resistant, but under persistent questioning, he finally relented. Michael mentioned something about a flash drive, he admitted, his voice trembling. He said it was his insurance policy. The cabin was a relic, a forgotten relic, hidden deep in the woods, overgrown with ivy and shrouded in silence. It was the perfect hiding place for secrets. We searched the dim, dusty rooms, our hearts pounding with anticipation. And then Logan found it, a tiny flash drive hidden beneath a loose floorboard. Back home, we connected the flash drive to Logan's laptop. The screen lit up with damning evidence, photos and videos that could shatter our lives. A cold dread washed over me as I realized the gravity of our situation. "We need to destroy this," Logan said, his voice barely a whisper. We transferred the files to another drive and consigned the original to the flames of our fireplace, but our troubles were far from over. A few days later, Detective Miller returned, her expression grim. "We found another flash drive at Michael's place," she announced, her voice cutting through the silence. "It contains photos of you and Logan. We also found his diary detailing the blackmail. We have enough evidence to arrest you both." The world seemed to crumble around me. I tried to explain, to plead my innocence, but it was futile. The evidence was irrefutable. Logan and I were arrested and hauled off to the station. As I sat in the cold, sterile cell, I realized the extent of the damage I had caused. I had risked everything for a fleeting moment of passion, and now I was paying the ultimate price. A wave of guilt washed over me. I couldn't let Logan suffer for my mistakes. I had to take the blame. The next morning, during interrogation, I confessed to the affair and the blackmail. I took full responsibility for my actions. Logan was released, his eyes filled with pain and regret. He wanted to stay, to fight for me, but I insisted he leave. I had to protect him, even if it meant sacrificing myself. As I returned to my cell, the weight of my decision settled upon me. I had destroyed my family, my life, my future, but perhaps somewhere deep down, there was a chance for redemption. Prison was a harsh reality, a stark contrast to the life I once knew. Every day was a battle for survival, a constant struggle to avoid trouble and maintain a low profile. Yet, even in this bleak environment, I found solace in Logan's letters. His words, filled with hope and unwavering love, were a lifeline, a reminder of the life I had lost and the future I yearned for. But as time wore on, my hope began to dwindle. The weight of my guilt and the consequences of my actions weighed heavily on my conscience. I questioned whether I would ever be able to atone for my sins or regain the trust of those I had hurt. Then, a new inmate arrived, a woman named Martha, a hardened criminal with a piercing gaze. She seemed to sense my vulnerability and approached me one day. "You're Harrison, aren't you?" she asked, her voice a low growl. I nodded, unsure of her intentions. "You need to be careful," she warned, her eyes narrowing. "There are people here who know your story. They don't like traitors and blackmailers." Her words sent a shiver down my spine. I had underestimated the danger I faced within these prison walls. Days turned into weeks, and the monotony of prison life became unbearable. I yearned for any distraction, any sign of hope. But then disaster struck. During a routine cell search, contraband was found in Martha's cell, and she, in a desperate attempt to save herself, framed me. I was summoned to the warden's office, a room filled with tense silence. The warden, a stern, imposing figure, accused me of involvement in the contraband distribution. I protested my innocence, but my words fell on deaf ears. "Your cell will be under strict surveillance," the warden declared, his voice cold and unforgiving. "You will lose all privileges." My world had shattered once again. The isolation, the silence, the endless monotony. It was a punishment far worse than any physical pain. I was alone, lost in a labyrinth of despair with no end in sight. The days turned into weeks, each one a monotonous cycle of confinement and despair. I was alone, adrift in a sea of silence and regret. One night, as I lay on my cold, hard cot, I heard whispers filtering through the thin prison walls. It was Martha, gloating to her fellow inmates. She deserved it, she sneered. People like her shouldn't live in peace. A surge of anger and frustration coursed through me. I knew I had to act, to prove my innocence. But how? In this bleak, unforgiving place, options were limited. I decided to appeal to the warden, a man known for his unwavering authority. I poured out my heart, explaining the blackmail, the threats, and Martha's malicious intent. But he was unmoved. "We have evidence against you, Mrs. Harrison," he said, his voice cold and dismissive. "If you want to change anything, provide new evidence." Hope dwindled, but I refused to give up. I reached out to Logan, my last lifeline. In a desperate plea, I explained my situation and begged for his help. Weeks turned into months, and I began to lose faith. Then, one day, a glimmer of hope appeared. I was summoned to the warden's office. There, standing before me, was Logan. "We found evidence," he said, his voice filled with determination. "Martha blackmailed other inmates. We have witnesses." The warden listened, his expression shifting. "We will review your case, Mrs. Harrison," he said, his tone less rigid. "But know that even if you are innocent of this crime, your past won't change." I was transferred to another part of the prison, a slightly less harsh environment, but the underlying reality remained unchanged. I was a prisoner, paying the price for my mistakes. Logan's visits were a rare source of comfort, but I knew our future together was uncertain. Years passed. I received a letter from Trevor, a heartbreaking reminder of the family I had shattered. His words were filled with pain and disappointment, a stark reflection of my own guilt. As the years turned into decades, I adapted to my new reality. I found solace in small acts of kindness, helping fellow inmates and participating in prison programs. But the weight of my past continued to haunt me. One cold autumn day, I received a letter from Logan. He was leaving, embarking on a new life far away. His words were filled with both resolve and sadness. As I read his letter, I realized that even the hope I had clung to was slipping away. The letter arrived, a chilling reminder of the life I had lost. "I knew our paths were finally diverging, dear Sarah," Logan wrote. "I will always remember you, but I need to move on. Goodbye." As I held the letter, a wave of despair washed over me. My choices, my mistakes had led me to this desolate place. I knew Logan was doing what he had to do, starting a new life free from the weight of my past. Shortly after, my life took another cruel turn. A minor infraction led to my transfer to a harsher prison, a place where cruelty and indifference reigned supreme. Every day was a battle for survival, a constant struggle against the harsh realities of prison life. One night, a riot erupted. The inmates, driven to desperation, rose up against the guards. Chaos reigned, the sounds of violence echoing through the prison. I was terrified, trapped in my cell, as the world outside descended into madness. Suddenly, the door to my cell burst open. A group of inmates, their faces twisted with rage, dragged me out into the chaos. I was a prisoner within a prison, a target for their anger and frustration. They led me to the prison yard, where a crowd of inmates had gathered, demanding freedom and justice. "What are we going to do with her?" one of the inmates asked, his voice filled with menace. "She's a traitor," another replied. "She has to pay." As they dragged me to the center of the yard, I knew my fate was sealed. My mistakes, my sins, had finally caught up with me.